Namaste and welcome. Unity of Washington, D.C. I'm back. So we are gathered together today, this evening, for a very special occasion because we are anchoring in prayer. And this evening, the specific topic that we are addressing is this idea of spirit moving from fear to faith. And there's something very important that I want us to understand at a very, very, very deep level, and that there is nothing that needs to be moved from. Let that breathe, let it sink in. Because what I mean by that is that there is nothing that can move us away from faith, because faith is the very substance of what we are as spiritual beings. Made not just in the image and likeness of the infinite, but that we are the infinite incarnating itself in, through, and as us in this moment and this forever moment always. And so if we are deeply resonating with this idea, then we are always in faith. Breathe it in. Faith is what we are. Breathe it in. The very beingness of our lives is source. It is spirit, and it has nothing to fear. Spirit has nothing to fear. And if spirit is what we are, the very essence of our being, and spirit fears nothing, then what is there for us to fear? It's what we are. We are faith made flesh. And the essence of our very beingness is beyond fear as well. But let us breathe and pause for a second, because we know that there are certain reasons why we feel fear. Oftentimes we feel fear because of the unknown or the unwanted. And both of these tend to hold more power over us than faith. Even though faith is what we are, we tend to give our power over to fear of the unwanted and fear of the unknown. But let's understand, there are many psychologists who have studied, and there's some debate about this, but typically it is said that babies have two innate fears: loud noises and falling. And those two fears are given to us as our beingness, as spirit being us. Spirit gifted itself with this idea of fear of falling, fear of loud noises. But first of all, is it really fear? I mean, if it's a baby, it's an infant, it's not like the baby or infant can communicate, so I am afraid of falling, and that loud noise terrified me. The baby doesn't express this, but is it not our interpretation of their response that we are calling fear? What if it's not fear at all? What if it is simply an internal physical warning sign, in the same way that if your house, you have a smoke detector and the alarm goes off? Is the alarm in the smoke detector going off because it's afraid? Or is it simply going off as a signal to something? The alarm is signaling something. What if the baby, that innate fear, innate feeling, is simply an alarm to say, that loud noise, just be mindful of it. Oh, this thing, be mindful of height because you might fall. What if it's not a fear at all? But what if this idea is what's moving us into this other realm of the fears that we learn, the fears that are hand-me-downs from parents and grandparents, from teachers, from culture and society, in the same way that we get a hand-me-down shirt? What if many of our fears are hand-me-downs as well? I mean, think about the number of phrases and sayings that we say, we learn, we hear as children, that subtly teach us to be afraid. Look both ways before you cross the street, lest you get hit by a car. Don't take candy or money from strangers, lest you get snatched and kidnapped. We don't tend to say, sometimes we don't tend to say the second part, but we say the first thing. Make sure that you're always wearing clean underwear. Is something that moms and grandmoms have always said. Make sure you're wearing clean underwear so that if there's an accident, you have clean underwear. But I'm like, if there's an accident, I might have an accident. But nonetheless, we pick up these phrases and sayings, and don't put all your eggs in one basket lest something happen to the basket and you end up eggless. We receive these phrases and sayings from well-meaning people, of course, but they're subtly planting anxiety and hesitation and doubt and reasons to eventually let it land and become fear. So there's this idea of what it means to shift into the truest essence of our being. Ernest Holmes says in the textbook, or the book called This Thing Called Life, and he said this in 1943, "No fear can remain where faith holds sway." Breathe that in for a second. No fear can remain when faith holds the power, when faith holds sway. Faith reunites us with the original creative spirit, the divine mind, which already exists at the center of our being. The kingdom of heaven, which is the kingdom of wholeness, is within. Then he goes on further in the same book to say, the secret place of the Most High is not a location. It's not a location, but a state of thought. It's a state of consciousness. It's a state of being, an interior awareness, a spiritual faith. So what do we do with that? How do we move forward, anchoring in the truth of who and what we are in each moment, with each breath? Are we willing to do the work to lift our eyes from the condition that we fear, lift our eyes to the hills from whence comes our help, our health, our wholeness, shifting consciousness from being downtrodden and gazing down to raising our consciousness, lifting our consciousness in the same way that we lift our gaze. Did you know that many times in the realm of psychology, psychotherapy, when someone's depressed, the shoulders tend to droop and the posture changes and the head drops and, we're downtrodden and we gaze down. And many times the therapist, the psychologist, the psychiatrist will say that simply by changing the posture and raising your shoulders and raising your head starts to have a physiological effect on our mood. So if we raise our consciousness, raise our gaze, raise our awareness from to. Instead of having a faith in God, have the faith of God. Pause and breathe. Because keep in mind, this is sort of like the fish swimming in the water that when asked, "Hey, fish, how's the water?" And the fish says, "Water." What water? That we are swimming in the very power and presence of creation itself. There is no outside of God. Nothing is ever outside of God. So everything is always within that which Spirit is. And so it's easy to forget. It's easy to become numb or like the commercial for whatever it is, the air freshener thing where they say you've become nose blind. You've been around the funk of the teenagers for so long that you don't realize what it smells like, or they don't realize what it smells like. It's very similar to that. We can be so surrounded by that we don't recognize Spirit everywhere. We don't recognize love everywhere because it's all that is. It's all that we are. So in this moment, we are asked to make concerted effort to be aware of the water, to be aware of the divine truth, to be aware of Spirit, of love, of joy, of power. There are those who will frequently quote Romans and say, when God is for you, who can be against you? And I say, when you know that God is you, Who or what could possibly ever stand against you? When you know that God, Spirit, the power and presence of all creation is living, moving, being itself as you, then what is there possibly that could exist, that could rob you, steal from you, deny you the truth of your being as faith made flesh? Breathe. Now let us remember that earlier I mentioned this idea of how, shifting our paradigm, shifting this from, because in the human realm of consciousness, there is the moving from, right? We go from house to house, from home to work. So we understand in space and distance there is a from. So for linguistic convenience, we talk about it. But ultimately there is no from. There is only that which is. But for a moment, let's talk about the paradigm of what it means to address fear to faith. Recognizing and understanding that if we are going to address one aspect of regarding our daily spiritual practices, to be in faith, to move as faith, to have faith as the driving force that moves our sails to make the boat move, as the very power and presence that beats our heart and moves our lungs, as all that is, if we are going to really anchor into that, then we have to apply this spiritual technology, the spiritual teaching, our spiritual practices, to every of the multifaceted ways that we show up. And what I mean by that is, if we want to move away from fear and be in faith, then we have to look at all of the multifaceted ways we show up. For example, do you encounter the world regarding money in any way, shape, or form? Meaning, do you use money? Do you have money? Do you get money? Do you earn money? Do you spend money? Do you engage with money in any kind of way? Then, adding spiritual practice to become a greater, more effective steward of money is the invitation. Because if there is fear and you engage in money practices, then I guarantee you that in some way fear can seep its way. It may not, but it can seep its way into money. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That's because fear has infected the consciousness of money. Keep your nose to the grindstone and, work like a slave. And all that is because fear has infected the consciousness of wealth and prosperity. And lack and scarcity is what shows up. If you encounter human relationships in your living experience, then adding your spiritual practice to how you encounter other beings is vital. Because fear will infect your relational status. That's what jealousy is. Envy. It's fear infecting the consciousness of oneness and love and trust. So in all of the ways that you show up, in all of the ways that we as multifaceted beings show up, if we want to stand in faith, move as faith itself, then we must look at all of the ways that we show up, all of the ways we experience life, and apply spiritual practices, spiritual principle to the way in which we use our minds, our words, our emotions, and the ways in which we show up and serve. Because if we're not doing that, then we're leaving some aspect untended to. So think of it as you get out of the shower, out of the tub, and, you put lotion on everything except for your right leg from the knee down. So everything else is smooth and silky, but from your knee down, it's ashy. It's ashy and dry. Why? Why would you leave that one portion untended to? Or when you're combing your hair, you comb all of it except for this one piece that you leave uncombed, unwashed, unkempt. Why? Why leave that one area? We don't do that. You're putting on lipstick or chapstick, and you put it only on the upper lip, but you don't rub it in. You just leave it on the upper lip. So the upper lip is luscious and silky, and the bottom lip, every time you smile, it cracks and bleeds. Like, we can see the common sense, the ludicrousness of doing that with everything else in our lives, but when it comes to this spiritual stuff, we don't see that money and relationships, the way we use our mind, the way we communicate, that all of this is interrelated. There is only one power and one presence, God the good, and if it is showing up in, through, and as me, then everywhere I go, God goes, and everyone that I speak to, on some level, is God speaking to God. But if I see them as enemy, I judge them as enemy, I criticize them as enemy, and I deny them love, joy, openness. I deny them this. It has nothing to do with them. Ultimately, what I'm doing is denying myself of this. I'm not saying be friends with the abuser. I'm saying, African proverb, when there is no enemy within, then the enemy outside can do you no harm. When you are at peace on the inside, then there is nothing external to you that you could ever fear. We understand that there are many people who will not watch a spooky movie, a horror movie, because once the movie is over, their mind has been planted with the Oogie Boogie Boogie Man, and they carry the image of the Oogie Boogie Boogie Man with them wherever they're going throughout the night. So that every sound they hear, wait, what was that? Did you hear that? The movie's over, and the thing in the movie doesn't really exist. But your mind has taken hold of it and made it a real thing. And so now your external senses are creating more reasons to reinforce it and believe it. So if you believe in war and rumors of war and you give it power, you believe in lack and scarcity and you give it power, you continue to fear the worst while preparing for the best. You know, I'm gonna prepare for the worst. I'm going to prepare for the best, but, because it doesn't matter which way you phrase it. If you're preparing for the best, but negates. I'm preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. Where's your energy going? It's going in your preparation. Is that really what you want to prepare for? Now, there's a certain level of course, be cautious. I'm not saying that if there's a tornado, run outside and, pray to be whisked to Oz. I'm saying, yes, stay away from the windows, move away from the door, go to the lowest level. Yeah, you do the precautionary things. You don't have to do it with fear as the driving factor. Because we understand that when we fear on a physiological, biological level, cortisol is rushing through every cell of our body then, and then when we are in PTSD mode, flight, fight, or freeze mode, hypervigilance, we are actually extending the amount of time these hormones are rushing through our body, and we are causing harm to our physical body temple. If we are going to stand in faith, move as faith, be in faith, and be faithful, then it takes time to stand in the practice of meditation, contemplation, communication, collaboration, synergy, creativity, imagination, intuition. Tune in and tap into all of the ways in which God is living, moving, and being who and what we are. There's a story and I don't remember which prophet it is, if it's Elijah or Elisha, but Elisha tells the folks, calm down. The powers that are for us outnumber that which could ever be against us. When God is what you are, what could possibly threaten or harm? Even when but Reverend Ray, I'm afraid to die. So then you believe that God can die. You believe that there is a finality rather than an immortality. Then that's where the spiritual work needs to be done. That's where the invitation of, I am afraid of death. I am afraid of that transitionary period. I'm afraid of, what did I say at the beginning? The unknown and the unwanted. Death is the great unknown, and I don't want it. So I get two for the price of one. If that's what we're afraid of, then do the deep spiritual work to transcend and move through and beyond that very thing that we fear. And so let us breathe as we prepare to enter into meditation. Let us simply breathe and prepare for that which is this spiritual practice of knowing, of being, of allowing God to live, move, and have its beingness as us. So we breathe, simply recognizing that this breath is not simply us breathing, but that this breath is spirit breathing itself as us. We breathe knowing not simply that we have the faith of a mustard seed, but that we recognize that this faith has us. In the same way that life has us, love has us, God has us. Not as a separate entity, power, or presence, but that ultimately this is God having itself in, through, and as our entire experience. And so we breathe, recognizing this oneness. We breathe, recognizing this peace. We breathe, recognizing this faithfulness that is the essence of our being. We breathe and surrender and let God be God as us. We breathe and hear the words of Ernest Holmes, who said, God in me, as me, is me. And we breathe. We breathe knowing that at any time we can shift our gaze and look up to the hills from whence comes our help. That at any moment we can upgrade and up-level our consciousness and our awareness. That at any moment, with any breath, we are able to anchor and ground ourselves to be aligned in the truth of who and what we are. And so we breathe. We breathe and surrender. We breathe and receive the very power of life itself, living itself, knowing that this life is forever, knowing that this thing called life is forever, knowing that the very essence of our being is without end, that even while in this physical body temple that appears to have bounds and limitations from one body to another body, one space to another space, that ultimately within the body of God there is no separation. Within the body of God there is that deepest resonance that knows there is nothing to fear. We understand and we recognize that we cannot serve two masters. We cannot serve the master of fear and the master of faith. So we allow the one to depart, and the one true power and presence of all that we are thinks our thoughts. So yes, every thought that we think is God thinking. Every word that we speak or type is God communicating. Every feeling and emotion that is felt and expressed is God feeling and expressing. And every way in which we serve and show up in the world is the way that God is serving itself and showing up in the world. And so we know that by gathering where two or more are gathered in the name, in the nature of faith, in the name, in the nature of love, in the name, in the nature of joy and peace and oneness and unity, that which is spirit, that which is God, that which is the creative impulse of the very universe itself is in the midst. And so right now we know that there are many more than three gathered together in this moment right here and right now. And knowing that we, the many, are gathered in one accord, in alignment with that which is faith and the power of creation, we know that this message, this day of prayer, this meditation is elevating the entirety of this planet. It's elevating schools. It's elevating the government. It's elevating the medical field. It's elevating science. It's elevating every way that humans show up. It is elevating in this moment. Elevating it to such a degree that things called racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, etc., all of these things are fading away and gone and gone and gone and gone. And what remains is the power and the presence of oneness, of unity, of love, of spirit made manifest. And so we anchor and we breathe and allow that to be the truth that is showing up in, through, and as us. Knowing that even though this meditation comes to an end, that which is spirit as us has no end. That which is spirit moving through us has no end. That which is spirit breathing us has no end. That which is the infinite, living, moving being itself, in, through, and as all that we are, has no end. This infinite, eternal, ever-evolving consciousness is all there is. It is what we are, and that at any moment we are able to reconnect and realign, because it is the truth of our being. I know this to be so, and together we declare it by saying, and so it is. Amen, Ashe. Take care.